Okay, let's go.
I'm Nicole Lee, and welcome back to You Never Know, where we talk about life, career, change, and the stories of people who have taken the unconventional road and embraced the unknowns. If you liked my content and podcast so far, remember to like, comment, or subscribe wherever you're watching or listening to this to help me create more relevant content for you in the future. It means so much to me. Technology is changing everything. And in the financial industry, AI, automation, and digital solutions are changing the way we invest and manage our money. Today's guest is in the thick of this very transformation. He has spent more than 25 years at Citi Global Wealth, managing affluent and high net worth investment businesses across Asia, Europe, and the Middle East, and has taken a leap of faith from traditional banking into Fintech and is now leading global distribution at Privé Technologies. But today's conversation isn't just about career transitions. We're going to go deeper into the biggest shifts happening in wealth tech, how AI is reshaping the financial industry, and so much more. I'm super excited to be having this conversation today. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Paul Hodes to You Never Know. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, this is my first time meeting you in person, actually.
That's right.
Yeah, we met for the first time virtually.
Exactly.
Through a mutual connection. And I'm super excited for you to be here today. I know that you flew in from Hong Kong.
That's right.
Yeah, so maybe to start off, Paul, tell us where you're from and when did you get to Asia?
Okay, I grew up in the U.S. I'm from the States.
Okay.
Even as a kid, was excited about travel and seeing the world. My first job out of university or college was in London in the financial industry. And then I came back to the States and worked out of Boston, which is my hometown, for about 10, 11 years, and then moved to Tokyo.
Okay.
And so I was working with Fidelity Investments, and who were at the time the largest mutual fund business in the world. And I moved from the Boston head office to Tokyo to help launch mutual fund distribution in Japan.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Which part of the States are you from?
So from Boston, East Coast, New England.
Okay. We talked a bit about it earlier, but you have I think an interesting last name, Hodes. Where does Hodes come from?
So my grandfather, all my grandparents were part of the great immigration in the early 20th century. So my grandfather came from Eastern Europe, and when he came over through immigration in those days, quite famously Ellis Island, immigrants would come through, and who's ever sort of writing down and doing the dictation on that day, they would come through and say, "What's your name?" And they would write down, "Okay, here's your name." And so, my grandfather would have said something in Russian that sounded close to Hodes. Maybe it's something like Hodes or something like that. And they kind of wrote it down and said, "Okay, here's your name. And next step, go on your way."
Yeah, I think it's so interesting to, at least for me, to find out more about my guests, and where they come from.
Sure.
So that's pretty interesting to hear. So you moved from London.
My first job was in London, and I worked in Eurobonds. I worked in Euroclear.
Okay.
It was a long time ago. I
Yeah.
won't tell you how many years ago, but just to give you an idea how long ago it was, when we were checking the bonds, we checked the bonds on microfiche, which is, you don't know.
No idea. No idea.
Yeah, and there was, the whole department had one computer that we shared to work off of. So that kind of gives you an idea of how long ago that was.
Yeah, no, I think, but it's interesting because you grew up at a time where you actually literally started from scratch,
Yeah,
and a lot
true.
of, young people these days, like we don't get that kind of experience. Did you always wanted to be in finance?
It's a great question. I think I was interested in finance and kind of making my way. As with everyone, you do different jobs as you know,
Yeah.
in your 20s and learning what you like, what you don't like.
Yes, of course.
But what I really wanted to do was I really wanted to get out and see the world, but live in the world. You know, I wanted to live in different parts of the world. And
Yeah.
that was, at least in those days, maybe still pretty
Yeah.
uncommon among my friends and family.
And you did exactly that. So you spent 25 years, more than 25 years at Citi Global Wealth.
That's right.
Across different countries, across different roles. You must have felt at some point that it was like home.
That's a great question. I mean, I think, 25 years, your colleagues, it's a good point. Your colleagues, your team, there are things you grow up together.
Yeah.
And the bonds you make, you can feel like a family. And, after 25 years, I was in, okay, I have to think about it. I was in Tokyo. I started in Tokyo, then with Citi, then London, then Singapore, then Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, then back to Singapore, London, and then back to Singapore. So, kind of hopping around. But you're absolutely right. You go to people's weddings, you celebrate the birth of their children.
Yes.
Those children grow up. And in some cases, during those 25 years, those people's kids are getting married.
Yeah.
And you develop really deep bonds. And I think that is one of the sort of terrific things. And even after leaving Citi, those bonds don't go away, which is great. And so I'm still regularly in touch with not only my most recent Citi colleagues, but ex-Citi colleagues as well. That has been just, I think one of the real great positive surprises in me changing my career.
Yeah, there's no one clear path to career.
Absolutely.
Right? And I know that a lot of the younger generation these days do talk about changing companies, changing roles over a shorter period of time. But I think not enough people talk about the experience and the lessons that come from staying in one place for a very long period of time. Tell me, what would you say are the most impressionable things or lessons that you've learned over these 25 years?
Sure, and I think I was equally excited about change and learning new things and doing new work in different jobs.
Yeah.
And so my roles, not just my country, the countries where I worked in and oversight, but my roles changed certainly in the early part of my career quite frequently. Every sort of 2 years, 3 years, I would change roles and
Was that something you requested for or
Absolutely.
something? That's a good point. Tell me more about that.
Well, I think one, you have to raise your hand for many things, and you're lucky, I think. I don't know if you feel the same way. If someone comes to you with a role that's perfect, that is you have to be incredibly grateful, because that is extremely lucky, and that I think you have to raise both hands for roles and jobs, and you have to be your own sort of career counselor.
Right.
Absolutely. Don't you feel the same way?
I think
given your
that,
career.
I think that it is a mix of being proactive,
Right.
like you said, like raising your hands, both hands. But I think it's also a balance between that and the environment that you're in, the bank or the institution that you're in as well, and the timing and
Yeah, absolutely.
and whether it moving to a certain role, was that available at that time, or does someone have to create it for you? I think there are a lot of different factors. But I think one thing that I and many people may not have done enough is to actually say you want to do something.
Right.
Right?
I mean, I think you've got to have a good relationship with your manager.
That's very important. I would say one of the biggest factors.
And then you've wanted to spend the first 18 to 24 months in any job focused on that job. So,
True.
you probably don't want to go to your manager after sort of 9 months in a row and saying, hey, I'm thinking about the next job.
Yeah.
But I think, the time when I worked at Citi, it was a very demanding place. And we demanded a lot of ourselves, and the teams managers demanded a lot of us, but one of the things that was consistent is Citi bankers were very focused on their careers and what was next and how did my career grow. And so I think that having those discussions was quite normal, and with your manager, but also, across the area, and kind of keeping aware of what opportunities were opening up. And I think because in my career, people moved around all over the world. Right. What you found is that you very quickly got a global network of people who that you work directly with. Right. So they know who you are, they know what you're able to deliver, they know how you're able to work as a team or as a leader. Yeah. And I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, I know one thing that struck me about what you said is you said you have to sort of also stay in one role for about 18 to 24 months, right? And I think that one thing that I've realized as well is that it is inevitable that when you're in corporate, there are some rules or unspoken rules that you have to play by.
Sure.
Right? But it isn't an easy game to navigate, to be very honest. It isn't an easy game to play. What would you say to someone who is currently in a big corporation, a big bank, and how to actually navigate, the sometimes, complex dynamics in working in a big institution?
Yeah, I think one, if you've been there a few years, you have colleagues and friends. And so understanding from them what's going on and using your network, I think is really valuable. The other thing that I would say is if you haven't been given a mentor, is to go out and search for mentors. And those are people who are more senior than you, have more experience, but you've done a project with them, for example. There's some interaction you've had with them that's positive. So it's not just you're knocking on someone's office door that you don't know well.
Yeah.
And and you don't have to make it an official title. Hey, I'd like you to be my mentor, because I could.
I get it.
But coming to me, hey, if you have 20 minutes or half an hour, of your time, it'd be great. If you don't mind, I can ask a few questions about the organization and maybe the way you see the organization moving forward.
Yeah.
And asking them, and have them open up about their careers. And I still am talking to people who I consider my mentors, and from Citi, who are now ex-Citi, and some still Citi, and incredibly valuable. Just to meet them for lunch or even a cup of coffee. My ex-boss from Asia gave me an ang pao this year.
Oh, so sweet.
Yeah, during Lunar New Year.
That's really nice.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
And again, someone I consider my mentor, and always really valuable on the advice. So I think building the relationship with not only with colleagues, but with more senior people, because you're right. How do you navigate, but also how do you understand the changes that are going on with an organization? So there are times in the organization where you may not want to raise your hand because there's sweeping changes going on, and maybe it's better to wait for those changes to change first, because your job may change even with those changes, and then understand once things have kind of settled. But at other times, maybe even the winds are changing, you understand the direction, you can go in via your mentor or colleagues and speak to other people who might be hiring for a role in their team.
I really love this topic, and you've given really good advice. And the reason why I say that is because I think we don't talk enough about this. There are so many people in big corporations not knowing how to navigate the corporation itself. And I think talking about it and sort of giving a bit of tips in terms of it's not actually easy to learn how to play this game. And I say game because it sometimes is. And like you say, sometimes reading how different moves that the organization makes, the strategy, the slight shifts in nuances and what different senior people actually say affect you as a person, and knowing when to reach out, raise your hand, step back, reading the room of the entire organization, reading the room of your division, your function is extremely important. And why I say it is also because it has helped me to read the room better after I've left.
Ah,
yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and not many people actually have had that experience because it is actually a skill that you hone actually being in a big organization.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, like anything, you raise your hand for jobs, you go talk to jobs, and you may not get it, and that's okay.
True.
And that, that's part of the learning process. So even internally, and it's okay to go for jobs and not get it. And then people are aware that, this person wasn't a fit for whatever reason on that, but they're interested in and your name gets on a list. So I think that's okay. And having those dialogues, and I guess having those dialogues in company, but it's always good to have those same kind of dialogues outside of your big company as well.
Yeah, the funny thing is I probably built my network after I left, UBS, and I realized that, hey, it's so valuable, and something that I didn't do enough was to build my internal network.
Yeah.
And so, I agree with you. One advice would be to really build your internal network.
And I think the hardest part is when you're working for a big company and you're that busy and you're working those many hours is to carve out the time. And
exactly.
I think, when you're on big projects or things are going on and there's a lot of stress and you're doing a lot of work, it's very hard to carve out that time.
I get it.
And and that is one of the challenges. And that, when you announce a big shift, as you and I both did, people come to you. And so your network, look, so you're making a big change. And you're right. And that a lot of the people who I hadn't been in touch with for a year in some cases reach out to me, or I reach out to them, and sort of rebuilding that network. And I think, didn't you find that even if you'd left UBS or Citi and it had been a few years, just by reaching out to people, that how amenable people were to meet for a cup of coffee?
100%. In fact, more amenable to meet you after you've left.
Interesting. Why do you think more?
Well, I think because, and tell me if it's your experience as well, when you're within the bank, sometimes people do see people as competition.
That is interesting.
And I realized after leaving the bank that people don't see you as competition, and they actually share much more. They're much more open to having coffee chats and letting you learn them as people rather than to see you as someone trying to fish out for information.
Oh, yeah, that is interesting. And I guess once you're outside the big company, the first things you talk about are going to be family, personal, your personal journey, how things are going. Where if you're in the company, the first thing you're going to talk about is the project, the latest promotion, or the latest person who's moved, and you're right, and that sometimes the personal things, the things that really bond us together, start going at the end of those conversations
100%,
when you're working.
100%. I've developed much stronger connections to, UBS people, UBS alumni as well, now that I've left. And I think it's very meaningful, actually.
Yeah. And I really would say reach out.
Yeah.
And continue reaching out. And, and that you'll be surprised how willing people are not only to speak with you and you get new ideas, but also but connect you with other people. Like you and I were connected actually by someone who used to be on my team at Citi. and you make new connections from just reaching out. And so
100%. Yes. So why did you leave?
Oh, it's a great question. So talk about winds of change.
Yes.
So I was, there were big sweeping changes going on in the organization. So the first one was from the CEO, slimming down the organization and creating focus meant the selling of 12 consumer businesses, banking businesses. And so, when I was at that point in my role, I was what was called the wealth management head for Citigold and Citigold Private Client for 17 markets. 12 of those markets get sold.
Wow.
And even before they got sold, or they were split off into
Right.
a separate division. And so that was,
Wow.
that, and again, because we had these relationships, and these bonds across all these businesses, and people we knew about and cared about, and real friends. And so that was, from a business level, quite understandable what the CEO and the management organization was trying to do. But personally, it was really tough. We were the largest consumer wealth business in Asia, and growing fast and super innovative. And for this to happen was that was kind of the first shock. Then integration between the consumer wealth business and the private bank, and reorganization of the teams, and then suddenly, for the first time in my career, my reporting line was, my boss was in New York, wasn't in Asia. And and the way my boss looked at Asia was quite different, right? It was far from head office. They were impressed with the size of Asia and the innovativeness, but it was still, you could feel that there was a real difference because the importance of head office out of New York. And I think, and then the CEO at the time, announced further changes, which is that there would no longer be regions. So at that time, I was, the head of Asia investments for Citigold Private Client, and the high net worth business, which was a team in the private bank. And there would no longer be a regional office, and I was a regional. My job was regional, and that it would be split into clusters. So those are strong wins, probably pretty easy to read. And so I, throughout that time, was having discussions with, and real thoughts. Okay, these changes are happening to me. I've had this kind of long career in wealth, a long career with Citi, and before that with Fidelity. What do I want to do? What was my next step? And I was reaching out and having conversations. In this case, it was more external conversation, because internal was pretty clear, the changes, and I really wanted to stay in Asia. My bosses out of New York changed. My new boss was really nice and was trying to craft a role for me. And then as I was reaching out, it happened to be that for discussions early on in the process, Privé Technologies, I was actually a client, and at my team, we had hired Privé in as an engine to a platform we used for our relationship managers called Total Wealth Advisor.
Right.
And Privé was an engine that did sort of portfolio analytics, risk analytics, rebalancing within our tool. And so when I reached out, so I knew Julian, who's the CEO of Privé Technologies, and he said, well, why don't you come work for us? And I said, well, I'm a business guy. I'm not a technology guy. And he's like, I'm not a technology person. He's like, we've got plenty of technology people that were set on that. And so that really got me going. But again, I brought up the conversation with him. And again, reaching out, I think, is so important.
First of all, thank you so much for sharing that part of your story, because we know there are a lot of people in the finance industry who aren't that open to sort of sharing this story. So thank you. I really appreciate it. And I have a couple of questions to ask. First of all, it's getting more and more common across the financial industry where there are, constant, restructurings and reorganizations. Why do you think that is?
Well, one, I think there was sort of among the big global banks and investment firms, there was massive growth in headcount and hiring, and I think we've seen it in not just with Citi on the CEO side, but we're seeing it more recently with other big global banks where the CEOs are saying things have gotten too complicated and we need to start streamlining.
Too big.
too big, too complicated, too many decision points, and too many layers.
Right.
And I think that's a kind of a consistent theme. And, in the back of it as well is what I would say is the operations and technology team in the back end, they've been at it because of digitization that's been going on for certainly the last 10 years. Things are streamlining as well. And you can see middle office with digitization and even with the advent of digital channels, even the front office driving efficiencies and driving delivery on mobile and desktop functionality is also a way that big organizations can think about streamlining as well. So I think all these things kind of happening at once, and it's very common in our industry, and I think the key is, just as we were saying before, is if you can see those wins coming, and I was lucky enough, our CEO was very clear on her vision, and she told it publicly and she told it to the organization, and my management team in Asia was very clear on what potential next steps were. So those wins were sweeping and easy to read. And so, you just got to understand then, given those changes, what are my opportunities?
100%.
And I had already gone through this big change of the sell-off of 12 markets, and and where would I want to work? So as the decision-making shifts to head office, which for me was New York, is that someplace, then should I move to New York? And so then you have to sort of balance what you want on a personal basis from what what makes sense in your career as well.
Thank you for sharing that, because it's very good insights from that, because it reminded me kind of why I wanted to move out of banking into fintech in the first place, because of all this. Sometimes you forget all the intricacies of the thought process that you had at that time. And by you sharing, all these different factors that influence how you see the bigger picture in terms of trends, in terms of what's coming, in terms of what's not coming, and where you as a person in the organization fit into that bigger picture.
Right.
And what is your priority at that time to sort of make you think about where do you want to go in the next 2, 3, 5 years?
Right.
Is that role that you're in strategic enough in the context of everything, right?
Yeah. And you must feel too, at different parts of your life and your journey, you want different things.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
You do change and want new things, or want to, and for me, the idea of doing something where I could leverage the skill sets I had. I knew from a business end how to use fintech platforms. I knew from my team, who were project managers, how to build things. But also I knew on the distribution end what relationship managers would use and wouldn't use. And I knew how to figure out how to monetize and how to add value. But how do you leverage that in a different way?
100%. You mentioned about what the CEO, Julian, said about, we don't need more tech people, we need business people. And he's 100% spot on, because I think we talked about it during our chat, in that I think fintechs don't realize, or probably need to realize, that the people that come from the traditional world are so valuable in terms of the experiences that they have for the clients that they want to go for, right? And I think you alluded to it as well, is that the experience that you have across, traditional banking, the clients that you serve, the problems that they're, facing, actually make you very valuable for this new venture.
Well, thank you. I hope so. What I do know, and when we met before, we discussed this, is that there is a language that, having worked in the wealth side, when you and I go sit down with someone who's managing a wealth business, and they're thinking about what their needs are from a fintech.
Yes.
We know what in many ways what they're thinking about or what their needs are because we've been in that seat.
Yes.
And we speak a similar kind of language.
100%.
And, we know some of the challenges that they face either from their distribution arm or that they may face from their compliance team or fitting into, making sure that they're strictly following, regulations or regulatory regimes. And so, I think, and I guess to your other point, I think in any teams, in any organizations, having people with sort of diverse experience and diverse views is really helpful. When I talk with the developers, the way they see the system is so different from me. And so even if I can sort of start glimpsing from their eyes where they see, opportunities, but, and gaps or risks in platforms is so helpful for me to kind of, try to see from their eyes as well. So I think having that balance is really important.
What has been the biggest surprise for you moving from banking to fintech?
Biggest surprise? Well, people are people. I would say people are people. And,
what does that mean?
I think people want to feel a sense of accomplishment, and people want to succeed in their jobs, and people want to do the right thing. I think the differences are in a fintech or a smaller organization, the founders, that business is their children, right? You can be very loyal to a big company, but our big companies were not our children. They weren't our parents either. I just want to be clear.
Sometimes we think they are, but they aren't.
Earlier in our career, maybe we thought, that's true. Telling you. But and I think that is a different understanding than a founder's perspective. In Privé, the business has been 14 years, so I guess it's not a child. That's it's a full grown or teenager or something, but or an adult, a young adult. But and I think to understand that they've been running this business, the business I'm in now, for 14 years, and they ran it from infancy. And so what they've seen and experienced and how they've kept this business going and growing all this time, that is a very different experience than me working 25 years and growing businesses in countries.
Interesting.
And so I think,
How does that make you feel then working in the fintech with that founder being a parent and the fintech being their child? Does that change your perspective of how you operate?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I talked with Julie and Charles before I joined, and we were talking about, what kind of role I could play, I actually used that analogy, and I said, the way I see this is your child. You raised your child. Think of your child as an athlete. And I'm coming in to be a coach.
Right.
So I want to help get that the teenage or university student athlete even better, even stronger, even faster.
Right.
But I'm not going to do anything without checking with you guys. I'm not going to go on a new exercise program secretly.
Right. Yeah.
I've got to run it by you guys.
Yes.
And so I can have a great relationship as a coach.
Yeah.
Right. And that can still be a leadership role for an organization. That's not to say, but to understand that there is going to be that difference, and that the idea is, I think the best coaches work together with the parents. Yeah. And so I actually use that analogy when I talk with them, and it really is the way I see it. That I am there to help grow the business even further, but do it in the right way to strengthen the business as it grows, and to be able to use my experience and my relationships in the industry to help that.
That's a very good analogy, and actually a very good awareness of what being part of a fintech is versus being in a corporate. And I think it's very good perspective for someone who's also thinking about joining a startup and what it actually is versus what you think it is. Because you do have to have a bit of a big change, I would say, in mindset in terms of how you operate and what it is.
Yeah, and how did you find you went from UBS, big global financial player, into the fintech space. How did you what did you see in terms of the adjustments for you?
Huge adjustments. I think one thing I try to be as prepared as I could be.
Right.
But I think one thing I didn't realize was the differences in the types of resources that were available to you.
Good point.
And therefore, we are all hardworking people, but I think it's more to that than just hard work. I think it's about being able to piece so many different pieces of the puzzle together with little resources. And that takes a lot out of you, and it's actually a lot about project management skills versus just your expertise in that area.
Sure.
And I think people underestimate how important the skill of project management is when you actually step out of a big corporation where you have so many different teams and functions doing things for you.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. In that that you have to be resourceful,
and creative.
Yeah, and creative.
Yeah.
I think there are fewer meetings.
Yes.
There are fewer meetings.
Fewer steering committees.
It's not one of those things like it's 6 p.m. and now I have to get my work done.
Yes.
Which, in a big organization, you've done meetings or you put out like email fires or whatever.
Yes.
And then at 6 p.m. and you're like, okay, now I got to get, I have my list of things I need to do today. And now I need to start them. And I think that scenario is different, but you're much more in control of your time.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right that you've got to be resourceful, creative.
Super.
And in a big organization, a lot of thought is who in that organization should I who should I go to? Who should I be working with on this? Or, I've got a question, or I want to run this business, or I want to run this project. Yeah. Who do I work with in those other teams? Who do I know from, or who are the people on my team know and recommend? And I think in a fintech, it's so small, you're working with the same people on everything. So you don't have to spend time thinking, who do I work with? But that everyone is stretched.
Very stretched.
And that you've got to, you've got to be resourceful and you can't be afraid to do anything yourself.
No.
Right? There is,
which must have been quite a big change for you, because you were very senior at Citi. And,
Well, I will tell you.
Now you have to do everything yourself. There's no PA.
I will say that was the question that people asked me. Look, I had a PA. I had an amazing chief operating officer who worked for me, COO.
Yeah.
Right? And I had a team in the regional office of managing directors who were incredibly smart, highly skilled, really capable, and they had very long careers, many of them very long at Citi and director levels, and those conversations were more them telling me, hey, can we do this? Hey, what do you about this? What do you want to do? And it was like, okay, yes. And that is different.
Very different.
But I also came from the consumer banking side.
Okay.
And so it was it's a little different from wealth. And so in that, and we would drop into country. So I wasn't spending my time, sending off messages, and I was going to different countries or my country teams and spending time with them, and especially those teams where things weren't working well. I had worked in individual countries, so I'd worked in Tokyo in the business there, in London on the offshore business in London, in Malaysia. I was the retail bank head in Malaysia, and working with those teams and kind of rolling up your sleeves and trying to get work done, trying to grow the business, trying to fill in gaps if there are gaps. And so
you knew what it was like, kind of.
Yeah. And it for me, it was some of the most fun, challenging, but fun parts of my career was taking a business and growing it or turning a business around that was struggling and coming up with new ideas and creating some focus and driving it forward. And so, yeah, it really, that part, look at, I certainly miss my COO. In fact, I'm having dinner with her and my and the person who ran my governance team for me, my regional governance head. I'm having dinner with them this week.
Yeah.
I personally miss them, and it's great. I catch up with them every time I'm in Singapore. But and they were phenomenal.
Yeah. But then you have to learn how to do without these roles in fintech.
Yes, and that you've got to just do it yourself.
Yes.
But by doing it yourself, you'll learn it a lot faster.
100%.
Right?
Yes. It's painful, but you learn a lot. It's
Exactly.
I know.
Exactly.
It's painful, but you almost learn like front to back what needs to.
You have to, because there's no other option.
Correct.
Right? There's no one to hand it off to. No,
and one good thing is that you have the foundation, so you can actually pick it up faster. It's just a bit painful.
And then for me, the project management team, the product team, the tech teams, the guys in my organization, they have been around. They're teaching me, so there is real talent there. So it's not that I'm not the developers. I'm not doing development. I've got the project management team is still a project. The service team doing servicing. So there are people doing great things. It's the sort of management administrative functions.
Yeah.
Those don't exist in fintechs the way they do in big organizations, and you just kind of got to plow through it.
So you moved from wealth in the bank to now serving these wealth managers, right?
Exactly.
What has changed and what hasn't?
What's really interesting is many of my clients are ex-Citi bankers, and so we know each other. We know each other from past roles, and so that's been great. I think in wealth, you always know the importance of your clients, because your clients are giving you they're your
bloodline.
They're your revenues. They pay your salary.
Yeah.
And so that isn't different. You always understand that our clients are giving us the revenues, they're paying my salary, and the importance of clients.
We often talk about technology.
Yes.
Right. Transforming things, changing things. Do you think that the wealth management industry is changing as fast as where we think it should be?
Interesting. I think with AI, there will be no choice. So like when the internet came in, it took a little while, but there was no choice. If you don't have a website, clients can't log in and see their balances, and for consumer be able to place transactions and then get even basic advice or information on the internet. You, especially in Asia, if you didn't have mobile connectivity, you're no longer in business, right? I think AI is the next shift. So the AI revolution is already here, and things are changing so fast. I mean, it's really exciting, but from the clients and prospective clients that I've been talking to, there is a high level of interest in AI, and the understanding that that all organizations, not just in wealth, are going to need to adapt it and adopt AI and figure out how it works. And there's huge benefits and opportunities, but like with every new technology, it comes with additional new risks. So, to understand both of those, I think is really important.
When you said that they have no choice with regards to AI, what did you mean, and which areas do you think would AI benefit these wealth organizations the most?
Something we call AI Go, which is portfolio optimization. I think that was patented back in 2018, leveraging AI. We now, for clients, are rolling out and working with clients to do content, so where you can take a CIO view from head office and via AI produce talking points for retail clients that make sense, that have a framework around whatever your compliance framework is, in multi-language, and then uses those views to say, how would that impact the views on client portfolios?
Yeah.
And those shifting views, then what would then the recommendation be for those clients? Not just, buy the X percentage into U.S. large caps, or move away, move away from some of your overweight on U.S. technology firm, but actually down to the level of which product and the amount recommended to optimize that client's portfolio. That last piece is something that I used to do in my previous job. We called a strategy and playbook deck every quarter, where we would take the CIO views. And
Sounds familiar.
Team of research people who would rewrite the CIO views, edit them so they made sense for retail clients, and relationship managers would create a presentation deck that with the CIO views, the model portfolios, how they shifted, then would give a recommendation, themes, and then selected products, mutual funds, stocks, and bonds that fit those themes. And then in parallel, we'd work with the DM team in each one of the countries and regionally to pull the list of names of clients whose portfolios were skewed against the house view. Right? So every quarter, that took 2 weeks of a lot of very smart people working very hard.
I get it,
Now that takes seconds with AI.
I love that, and I think it's extremely efficient. Do you think with the greater availability of these AI tools that more and more consumers actually can then actually do investing themselves?
Exactly. So one thing I did was I put in my investment holdings. And ingested into AI. And it gave me investment recommendations. It gave me the deviation against those views. So AI can give it, whether it's medical, legal, investment advice. And so the key is that what the wealth industry, wealth tech needs to say, okay, and wealth management needs to understand, if clients can do it on their own, what value add do we bring?
Exactly.
And part of that is AI makes mistakes. So if the underlying data isn't right, or you hasn't ingested it correctly, what comes out isn't correct. And I think we've all had cases where we're working on AI and there's something comes out and it's like, is that right? Very important as a wealth tech provider when we have AI tools is to build in guardrails into those tools to make sure that what comes out is right. The other thing is the amount of time that you spend, especially with big wealth institutions, on their underlying data and making sure the data is clean. Because AI moves so quickly that if there's gaps in the data, it will ingest it even with the gaps, and the results may not be accurate. And the last piece is, which is a real change for wealth management institutions, is pre-AI, you ran UATs, right? User acceptance testings. And you just ran different scenarios and you got a result. And you measured against the accurate answer, okay? And if it matched, pretty well you knew that, you did it enough time and they all matched the right answer, then you felt pretty comfortable when you rolled that out into production, it would give you the right answer. But the thing is, AI learns and changes. So it's not a one-to-one equation. You are not always going to get the same result. So then to understand that and be able to build in guardrails within the AI to make sure, and that's one of the challenges that the big organizations, all organizations have on their compliance team is AI can look like a black box. And you put something in, and even if you put the same thing in, you get different answers. And so understanding how that works and understanding the guardrails to making sure that you're much more confident in what the results are and that your compliance team is confident as well.
No, it's a different set of skills.
Exactly.
And actually it's discretion.
Yes.
That's where the human value is. It's the discretion of the use and the outcome and the outputs of these new technologies and
Yes.
even, using ChatGPT, whatever you put in, however you ask it, the parameters you give will give you different results.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think for me, what's exciting about what you said is in some parts, AI brings the power back to you as an individual to actually empower yourself to make better investment decisions with then the help of experts.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think certainly in Asia, the importance of a person in
Yeah.
wealth that you trust.
Yeah, that was my other question is like,
Right.
will they be replaceable, right?
I do know there's a big big technology firm that's investing heavily in AI who's made presentations of the relationship manager of the future who's, totally a sort of avatar, speaking from AI. And I think that doesn't strike me as the near future.
Right.
And I'm not sure wherever. I mean, successful people like we talked about relationships and building relationships for careers.
Yes.
But what we really talked about in the first part of it is building relationships for advice.
Yes.
Right? So all of us go on to ChatGPT and other things to self-diagnose anything medical.
Yeah.
But we still go to the doctor because we trust that the doctor is going to give us advice. We may have done some research beforehand.
Yeah.
And I think relationships that provide advice, I think that certainly for affluent and high net worth or ultra high net worth, I don't see that going away.
Yeah. In fact, I think that the value of real quality advice will go up.
Yes. Advice that you can trust.
Yes.
And what AI will do was empower those relationship managers, investment advisors, portfolio counselors, so they can give much better advice.
Yes.
They can also, at a push of a button, understand what's going on in the marketplace in a way that makes sense not only for them but for their clients. So things can be customized and personalized, whether it's the advice or the way to describe the advice.
Yeah. I think the message that I'm getting here is, at the end, we use technology to our advantage in a way that helps us become more valuable, more accurate, more, detail oriented than what we would be if we didn't have it. So I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions. Get ready. What is one advice you would give to someone who's thinking of moving from corporate to startup?
When you change an organization, I think the most important thing is people think about the job, they think about the boss, they think about how much they're being compensated. But one thing that's so important, and it's kind of the hardest thing to learn during your interviews, which is what's the company culture?
100%. Yeah.
And you can get that through friends if they've worked there or they currently work there. You can get there through, looking at online chats and there's reviews and things like that. But I think trying to understand the company culture is so important. And as you and I both know, even among the big global wealth firms, they're quite different in the way decisions get made, things get communicated, projects are managed. And the relationship between a head office and the team in Asia, for example, and how those interactions work. And so it's the same thing I would say is, yes, it's smaller. Yes, you'll have to do more on your own.
Yeah.
You're going to have to be scrappy and energy is important. Having energy is important. But understanding as much as you can beforehand company culture and knowing that in your interviews, when you speak with any company, big company, small company, you start asking about company culture, they're not really going to give you the insights. They're going to say, we're client focused. We're, results oriented. We care about our people. And I think those are all true. I think what you try to get at is what's the route they do to get to those points. And that really is talking with your contacts, your
Yeah.
friends of friends who used to work there, or things like that. And I think that is so important.
I completely resonate with that. And I think it takes someone who has been in a big organization and then left one and joined a startup to actually know that culture is underrated.
Yeah.
Second question.
Okay. I know I'm not making these rapid fire. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Do you only want one word answers? Yes.
No, it's okay. What is one game changer for financial investors over the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I mean, AI is the game changer. The game is already changing right now. I mean, that is singly the game changer, and I think you can see it. Every major wealth head I've seen recently putting out stories on here in Asia, certainly on AI and the impact. That is by far the game changer.
Yeah. As a consumer, I'm super grateful for AI. Actually.
Yes.
Yeah, because it really helps even outside of the financial industry.
For everything, right?
For design, for
You're
editing,
going on a trip and you're like, oh, I'm going to this location. What do you recommend?
Yeah.
Where should I stay? What, AI gives you an itinerary.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next question. If there was a song, if there was a song that would describe your career, what would that be?
Well, first of all, I'm terrible. My kids will tell you I'm terrible at singing. I can't carry a song. I don't have a song. I've been completely honest.
Yeah.
I don't have a song that sort of matches my career.
Favorite song?
I think the song that came up when I was a lot younger was a song by Elvis Costello called What's So Funny About Peace, Love, and Understanding. And I think that is a song that works for maybe life.
Okay. I need to go back and hear that. I might know that. Yeah, I might. I listen to old songs too, so I might know that. Okay, so Elvis Costello.
What's so funny about peace, love, and understanding?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question. You've lived in both Singapore and Hong Kong.
Yes.
Right? I know you're in Hong Kong right now. What is one thing you would swap?
I think the obvious one is the weather. It's tropical Singapore.
You prefer the weather in Hong Kong, or you prefer it in Singapore? Which
Actually,
one?
After living in Singapore, I really love the tropical weather.
Oh, nice.
And so I've gotten, I'm quite happy with tropical weather, and I now get cold easily. I have to admit that.
Okay.
Even though Hong Kong doesn't get really cold in the winter.
Okay, so you would put the Singapore weather into Hong Kong, okay?
Singapore in the urban part of Singapore, the work that Singaporeans have done and the government have done in greening Singapore is so impressive.
Yeah, very impressive.
And I think Hong Kong has beautiful space outside the cities, but I would bring the greening of Singapore to Hong Kong.
Okay. And what from Hong Kong would you bring to Singapore?
Maybe because it's so hot here that we tend to walk slowly in Singapore. Hong Kong, there's a pace.
Right.
There's a fast pace and an energy that works well. You just need to make sure you've had your coffee in the morning.
Okay, last question.
Yes.
You're from the US.
I am from the US.
Is there one thing that you miss about the US?
Friends and family. Easy. Friends and family.
Nice. Thank you so much today,
Thank you
Paul.
for having me.
It was really, really insightful. Had a really fun conversation.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you for the time.
so much.
It was great to talk with you.
Yeah, thank you.